My name is B. Liederman, and I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker. Zoe Weil is the co-founder and president of the Institute for Humane Education, where she created the first graduate programs in comprehensive humane education, linking human rights, environmental sustainability, and animal protection, offered online through an affiliation with Antioch University. The Institute for Humane Education also offers a solutionary micro-credentialed program for teachers, a free solutionary guidebook for educators, how to be a solutionary guidebook for students and change makers, and is an award-winning teacher resources to help educators and change makers bring solutionary practices to students and communities so that together they can effectively solve local and global challenges. Zoe is a frequent keynote speaker at education and other conferences and has given six TEDx talks, including her acclaimed TEDx, The World Becomes What You Teach. She's the author of 7 books, including a #1 Amazon bestseller in the philosophy and social aspects of education. The World Becomes What We Teach, educating a generation of solutionaries. Nautilus Silver Medal winner, Most Good, Least Harm. Moonbeam Leaders Transforming Their Communities and the State, and is the recipient of the Unity College Women in Environmental Leadership Award. She was also a subject of the Americans Who Tell the Truth portrait series. She holds a master's degree from Harvard Divinity School and the University of Pennsylvania, and was awarded an honorary doctorate from Valparaiso University. Welcome, Zoe. I'm going to leave the stage and let you impress us further.
Thank you, B, and welcome everybody. It's really an honor to be here, and I hope you've been enjoying the GLOW conference. So I wanted to begin by telling you a story. When I was in college, I dated a medical student for most of the time that he was in medical school. And one day he said to me that he thought that being a physician was the most noble profession. I was really irritated when he said that. And I think I was irritated for 2 reasons. The first was that I'd gone to college pre-med and had abandoned that path. So I was probably feeling a wee bit defensive. And the second reason was that I thought it was silly to rate professions based on their nobility. But the comment stayed with me for decades. And I found myself reflecting upon it some time ago. And I thought, even though I still think it's silly to rate professions based on their nobility, if pressed to say what I thought was the most noble profession, I would not hesitate to say teaching. And the reason is because there is no other profession that holds the future in its hands. Will our future be bright and healthy and just for everyone? The answer to that question lies more with teachers than any other professionals. Thoreau once said, there are 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil to one that is striking at the root. And Mahatma Gandhi once said, if we want to reach real peace in the world, we shall have to begin with the children. The education of children is the root system underlying all other societal systems. Teachers shape every profession: elected officials, healthcare providers, farmers, engineers, entrepreneurs. All of them are educated by teachers. What sort of future will these professionals create? Will all of us, in whatever jobs we do, create? Again, that lies with teachers. So I found myself wanting to ask all of you, and I won't be able to read your comments in the chat while I'm talking, but I'll look forward to reading them later when I see the recording. So my question for you is, why did you become a teacher? And what do you love about teaching? So feel free to type the answers in the chat or just reflect on them for yourself. And I want to tell you why I became an educator. So, as I mentioned, I went to college pre-med. I became an English major. I ended up going to law school very briefly. I dropped out very quickly. So I didn't know what I was going to do. I was on this very circuitous path, trying different things, and nothing was sticking. And then I went to Harvard Divinity School and was studying world religions and trying to understand how people make sense of the world. And I was looking for a summer job between the 2 years of graduate school. And I found this program that offered week-long courses to middle school students. And it was offered at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And I pitched a whole bunch of courses because I had a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things at that point. So one of the courses that I offered was the second most popular of the 60 courses offered that summer, which had nothing to do with me. They didn't know me. It had to do with the subject. And the subject of that particular course was animal issues. I wanted to teach young people what was happening to animals and how they could make animals' lives better. And because so many children love animals, it was not surprising that it was such a popular course. So in the middle of the week, I talked about product testing on animals. And so that's where anything from oven cleaner to personal care products and cosmetics are squeezed into the eyes of rabbits and force-fed to animals in quantities that are meant to kill them and smeared onto their abraded skin. And one boy went home that night and he made his own homemade leaflets. Now, this was in 1987. He did not have a personal computer. He hand wrote those leaflets. And he came back into class the next day with this stack of leaflets and he wanted to hand them out, not to his fellow classmates who'd all learned the same thing he'd learned the day before. He wanted to stand out on a Philadelphia street corner and hand out those leaflets. So while the rest of us were having lunch, that's what he was doing. He'd become a change maker overnight because he'd learned about something. So a couple of the kids in that class went on to form a Philadelphia area-wide student group, and one of them won awards for his work. And years later, so he went on to become an HIV/AIDS activist, and he was hired by the mayor of New York. He's still working for the mayor of New York many mayors later. And years later, I had the incredible opportunity to speak at an event with Jane Goodall in New York. And I hadn't seen him for, 18 years, but I invited him to come. I knew he lived in New York and I contacted him. So he came to this event. And so after we spoke and I was introducing him to some friends at the event, I said, "This is David. He was in the first humane education course I ever taught." And before I could even finish the sentence, he interjected, "That course changed my life." Well, it also changed my life. That's when I realized I wanted to be an educator. That's when I realized the incredible power of education. Now, so many of us teachers don't get to know that we changed somebody's life. We don't see all the ways we have influenced all of these people that we have taught. Sometimes we do, sometimes they tell us, but more often we never know. So here's this profession that is noble, that is so incredibly important. Does it pay really well? No. Does it have high status? In some countries, but not in the United States where I live. It certainly should have more respect and status. And so what I want to say to all of you educators who are here, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Your work matters so much. Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears a little. So for the past 40 years, I have been immersing myself in the atrocities and the destruction that we perpetrate on each other, on other animals, and on the ecosystems that sustain life. And this is because I'm a humane educator. And if I want to teach people how to build a just and sustainable and peaceful world, I need to know what we need to change. Now, you might think that given that I've been immersing myself in these horrors, that I would be full of anger and sorrow and despair. And sometimes I do feel those things. It's been a little challenging of late with what's happening in the world. However, most of the time, I am not depressed and I am not hopeless. And this is because I know that a better world is possible. I have been witnessing so many things get better in my lifetime. So when I was born, half of all people in the world lived in extreme poverty. Now that's about 10%, a little under 10%. When I was born, it was legal in the United States to discriminate based on race. And then when I was 3 years old, the Civil Rights Act was passed. When I was a child, smog and soot coated American cities. I grew up in New York City. And then in 1970, the Clean Air Act was passed. And the air is cleaner today in the United States, except when there are wildfires raging, than it was when I was a child. When I was a child, rivers and lakes, not just forests, were catching on fire because of all of the pollutants in our waterways. And then in 1972, the Clean Water Act was passed, and the waterways are cleaner now than when I was young. Women and girls, when I was a child, didn't aspire for many careers because they weren't really options for most of us. Yes, there was secretarial work, there was nursing, and there was teaching, but not much else. Now, more girls in the United States go to college than boys, and around the world, even where women and girls are treated as second-class citizens, the vast majority of girls go to school. When I was born, gay, lesbian, and trans rights were not on the radar at all. And now we have gay marriage, and many trans rights are encoded into law, despite the backlash that we have been seeing. And lastly, when I was a child, people didn't think that animals should be accorded rights. But a recent Gallup poll showed that the vast majority of people in the United States think that animals should be protected from cruelty. Now, I do not want to paint a rosy picture. 700 million people still live on less than $2 a day. And while the Civil Rights Act may have been passed, structural racism is embedded in so many systems, including our education system in the US and housing and the criminal justice system and our healthcare system. Smog and soot may be better in the United States, but in megacities in many other countries, they are terrible. And waterways may be cleaner in certain ways, but because of agricultural runoff, we now have ocean dead zones, and we also have plastic all over our oceans. And the last thing I'll say about these shifts is that even though most people think that animals should be protected from cruelty, vastly greater numbers of animals are being brutalized and killed because of the growing demand around the world for meat. So we have a long, long way to go. But the point I'm trying to make is that things can be bad and better at the same time. And if they can be better, they can be better still. So a better world is possible, but it's not inevitable. It is up to us to build it together. And the most strategic way that I believe that we can build that better future is to educate a generation of solutionaries. So what's a solutionary? So a solutionary is a person who can identify unsustainable and unjust and inhumane systems and then develop systems that are regenerative and healthy and equitable for everybody, and that do the most good and the least harm for people, for animals, and for the environment. So I hope you see that what's embedded in being a solutionary is this ethical imperative to do the most good and the least harm. A solutionary is not simply a problem solver. Somebody could be an engineer to solve the problem of damming a river or the problem of removing a mountaintop in order to get the coal underneath, but they are not solutionaries. Solutionaries are systems changers. They are not the same as humanitarians. So humanitarians, who are so important to relieve suffering, are essential for our societies. But if we're only humanitarians, we will constantly be needing to relieve suffering. We need to also be solutionaries who address the root and systemic causes of that suffering and that destruction and stop it. So I want to show a video. It's about 90 seconds to give you a sense of what this might look like. So Dee, if we could show the first video, that'd be great. I can't hear the video, so I don't know if others can. Can people hear the video? So we can't hear the video. There are always technological glitches. So B, whenever you think you can get the sound back on, if we can switch to the beginning of it again, that would be great.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out why the audio is not playing. Did it start at any point in time when I was running the video?
Nope.
Hang on. I apologize. Lucy is on and trying to fix it, and we'll replay the video.
I feel like I should keep talking to you instead of reading all the things in the chat, but I'm just going to be quiet until I hear that the video is not going to work, which won't happen, right? All right, I am going to keep talking while the tech gurus do their work in the background, and hopefully they can hear me as soon. Oh. Let's see if it works this time. Still not working. Okay. So just interrupt me, B, when you've got it working, or just get it started and I'll stop talking. So currently, educating students to be solutionaries isn't the mission of most schools. So why should I be asking you to take this extra step of integrating solutionary thinking and action into what you're already required to teach? And my answer is because it is crucial for the sake of our children and the world that they are both inheriting and shaping. And because it enlivens classrooms immeasurably, and because for so many of us, it fulfills the very reason why we became teachers.
Overwhelming.
Can we start that again? Because the sound came on.
Sometimes the world's problems can feel overwhelming. And it often seems like we can't agree on anything. But we know how to look at problems and solve them, don't we, Poppy? Take a look through these solutionary lenses. Solutionaries see how problems connect to one another. They do research. They map out the systems that perpetuate problems, learn about who is harmed and who benefits, and engage in some serious critical thinking. Then, they come up with solutions that do the most good and least harm to people, animals, and the environment. They also look for ways that they can personally make a difference. I've got great news. There are solutionaries all over the world. But imagine if there were more. Imagine if we educated a generation of solutionaries. By making schools and communities solutionary focused, we can set everyone on a path toward effectively and enthusiastically solving challenges wherever they find them.
Okay, we can stop the video. Great, thank you so much. Yay, it worked. So hopefully it will work for the next two videos a little more quickly. So you may wonder whether it's actually good for kids to teach them about the ills of the world with the expectation that they learn to be solutionaries and solve the problems that we have created and that generations before them have created. And given the rising rates of anxiety and depression among youth, it's worth asking if this is the best approach. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories to illustrate why I believe wholeheartedly that it is. So about 10 years ago, before the COVID pandemic, before wildfires were raging across our world, before polarization and division seemed to be splitting us apart and we couldn't come together to solve anything, and before anxiety and depression had become epidemic among youth, I was invited to speak to some middle school students at a school in Connecticut. And I began with talking to the 5th and 6th graders. And I asked them what they thought were the biggest problems in the world. And I wrote what they said on a whiteboard until that whiteboard was completely full. And those children said the same things that adults say. One boy even said sex trafficking, though he had not been learning about this at school. So then I asked the children to raise their hands if they could imagine us solving the problems that they listed on the whiteboard. And of the 45 kids in that room, only 5 raised their hands. Only 5 could imagine us solving the problems that we face. That was the most sobering moment in my then about 30-year career as a humane educator. I thought to myself, if these young people can't even imagine us solving the problems that they listed, what's going to motivate them to try? So I needed to do something to change things up pretty quickly. So I asked those children to close their eyes and take a few deep breaths. And I did a guided visualization with them. And it went like this. I asked them to imagine that they were very old and approaching the end of a long and well-lived life. And I asked them to picture themselves sitting on a park bench on a beautiful day, and the air around them was clean, and the waterways around them were clean, and the birds were singing, and there hadn't been a war in as long as they could remember. and nobody went to bed hungry. And we learned to treat other people and other species with respect and compassion. And then I asked them to imagine a child coming up and joining them on the park bench. And this child had been learning history in school and learning about much darker times. And the child wanted to understand how had everything changed for the better. So the child asked lots of questions. And then the child asked a final question. What role did you play in helping to bring about this better world? What did you do? So I gave the children some time to answer the question in their minds. And with their eyes still closed, I then asked them to raise their hands if now they could imagine us solving the problems they listed on the whiteboard. And this time, 40 hands went up in the air. It did not take much to restore their hope. What it took was imagining that a better world was possible and that they played a part in creating that better world. So a few years later, I was speaking at a teachers' conference in Guadalajara, Mexico, and the day before the conference began, I visited the school that was hosting the event. And when I got there, they asked me if I would talk to the fifth graders. So remembering that time that I talked to the fifth graders in Connecticut, I went into that classroom and I asked the children to raise their hands if they could imagine us solving the problems in the world. And every hand flew up in the air immediately. What was different? What was different is that their teacher had been teaching them about problems in the world, specifically environmental problems, in age-appropriate ways, and had been helping them to solve those problems. So their own school had installed solar panels and had created a composting system for their food waste and had replaced disposable water bottles with refillable water bottles. And they knew problems could be solved because they were solving them. They were learning to be solutionaries, and they were enthusiastic and engaged and enlivened, and they were agents of positive change. So yes, I believe that educating students to be solutionaries, even if it means that we are teaching them about problems in the world, again, in age-appropriate ways, is good for them. And it's good for our communities, and it's good for our world. So how can you do this? So there have been a number of sessions during the GLOW conference that have been offered by members of the team at the Institute for Humane Education. And I hope you will go back after the conference is over and watch those ones that you haven't seen, because they really break down how we can do this work. And all I want to say right now in terms of that is go to our website, humaneeducation.org, and you will find so many resources for wherever you want to be on this path to bringing this kind of solutionary focused humane education to your students. So we have loads of free lesson and unit plans. We have a free guidebook, the Solutionary Guidebook for teachers, and a companion guide for students called How to Be a Solutionary. And all you have to do is go and get an account, and you can just avail yourselves of these free resources. If you want to go a little bit deeper, we have a solutionary micro-credential program. And again, many of the speakers who have been at this conference have gone through that program. And the reason they're at this conference talking about this work is because they've been implementing it. They've been implementing it in Argentina and Kenya and Italy and Indonesia. And it's so exciting to see this work unfolding and to hear from the students themselves who have also spoken. So if you want to do the Solutionary Micro-Credential Program, we actually have a 50% discount if you have come to this conference. Somebody can type it right into the chat how to do that. And if it's still too expensive for you, contact us. We want to make sure that every teacher who wants to go through this program can do so. And finally, if you're thinking, I want to be a leader in this movement, I really want to go deep, we have online graduate programs with Antioch University, and we have teachers from around the world who have gone through our graduate programs. And you can get an MEd degree, you can get an MA degree, a graduate certificate, or the ultimate higher ed degree, you can get a doctorate in education, specializing in humane education through our program. So you can find all about that at our website. So I just want to say a couple words about teaching about controversial issues, because you may be thinking, I can't teach about these controversial issues, and it can be really challenging. I know in the United States, there are many states that have made teaching about controversial issues, and I'm saying controversial in quotes, teaching about issues that have been polarizing and divisive in our country. There are many states that are trying to prevent any teaching about any of these issues. And here's what I have to say. I don't think there's a better place to teach about issues that we call controversial than in school. And I don't think there's a better approach to teaching about these issues than the solutionary framework. And this is because the solutionary framework requires deep investigation and research. It requires being able to distinguish between facts and opinion, to learn what is disinformation and misinformation. It requires that students reach out to a variety of stakeholders who have different perspectives, and it cultivates collaboration across different beliefs, and it continually steers us away from side taking toward identifying the underlying problems about which we can agree so that we can solve those problems together. So I know that if you are in a state or a place where teaching about these issues may be extremely challenging, what I just had said doesn't solve the problem, but perhaps by bringing this solutionary framework, which you can, again, find on our website and download our resources, perhaps you can, working with parents and administrators and other teachers, convince your school and school district and parents that this is the most powerful way that we can come together to solve problems that we can all agree are problems. So what is the impact of this? I mentioned a little bit of the impact on those students in Mexico, but I want to share with you a video of students who are middle school and high school from the United States in Maine, where we did a pilot solutionary program. And this video was produced in 2018, and you're going to get to meet some of the teachers and some of the students who have done this work. And so if you could show the second video.
We're here from Deering High School.
We are from Wayfinder Schools in New Gloucester.
Hi, we're sixth graders from Falmouth Middle School. Recently, there has been a large uptick in harassment.
We identified 3 major problems during our water quality investigation.
The system contributing to animal testing is human consumption.
Our solution, we have typed up a 10-page legislative proposal to amend Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000.
The Solutionary Program is an initiative of the Institute for Humane Education to give young people the tools, the skills, and the preparation to be solutionaries able to solve real-world problems through their school curricula.
The main reason I adopted this program in my classroom is the idea that it took things to the next level by going into the action mode.
For me as an educator, my goal for my students is for them to become good global citizens, and I feel like this is a really direct way to help them practice those skills.
Having the stakes be a little bit higher than just presenting to your teacher, which is important, but having a little bit more of a wider audience, a little bit more impact, and the ability to maybe actually make the change and not just making a PowerPoint about something.
And that's our goal, is to make change makers for the future. And I feel like this unit for these sixth graders is going to affect them in lots of parts of their lives now, as well as in the future.
Because it affects everything. The future generation is going to be empowered soon. And if they're not educated and capable, then we're in trouble.
I honestly believe the way that the solutionary program works and the approach that they take to education, that should be infused into all aspects of the education of their students.
A lot of it is really up to the students, which is really nice for me because it empowers the students to really take the lead and take over.
It allows us to work with real problems in real time.
I feel like I'm actually doing something about it and I can actually help.
It helps me learn more about myself, more about the world.
I like this class because I get to learn more about the world and like what's going around, what's happening around us.
This class feels different from my other classes because it's just a lot more hands-on, and I'm working with a group to solve these problems, and we get to do research, and it's just really fun, and you get to do something that you feel passionate about.
Giving the students power over their own learning so they can choose what they feel most passionately about that and explore that and realize I can actually have an impact on my community and my world in the way that I solve this issue.
So right now we're focusing on being an active bystander, so intervening in a situation where somebody may be being harassed, whether it's in school or outside on the streets. It's cool for us to learn this training and to teach others so that we can get them help.
We're going to be there to help the person that is being harassed. This class has given me the skills and the confidence to do it.
The kids' enthusiasm, the buzz in the room, the conversations that they're having that are really making them more aware of local and global issues. I mean, this is why I went into teaching, and it just feels really meaningful.
Bring the solutionary program to your school. Do it. It'll make you think. It will make you step out of your comfort zone, and it will open your students' eyes to a whole new way of thinking, and it will empower them.
So I hope you found them as inspiring as I do every time I watch that. So I'm going to wrap up soon. And I told you about that guided visualization that I did with those students. And I want to do a visualization with you teachers. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and take some deep breaths. And imagine that you are very old and approaching the end of your long and well-lived life. And I want you to picture yourself on a beautiful day, sitting outside in a circle with many of your students. They're adults now. They have careers, they have families, and they've come to gather with you because they want to tell you how you impacted them. So allow yourself for the next minute to hear what they have to say to you. So I know a minute isn't long enough to really listen through your imagination to the impact that you have had on so many people. So I hope that later you'll allow yourself to sink into this visualization again and really listen. That is your legacy. What you do matters so much. So I'm going to show you one more video. It's just 1 minute long. And if we could cue the last video.
This hand will scale up tidal energy to address climate change. This hand will help draft your country's foreign policy to reduce conflict. This hand will inspire societies to embrace the compassionate treatment of animals. This one will set the new legal standard in the protection of human rights. This hand will provide farmers with regenerative systems to keep food healthy. This hand will help ensure equal access to education. This one will protect endangered species. This hand will help prevent cancer, will address income inequality, protect our environment.
When I imagine educating a generation of solutionaries, I can see the grave problems that we face in the world being solved. And I can see vibrant, joyful young people, not only prepared for whatever they face in the moment, but for whatever comes in the future. That's what I hope we will all do together, is create this solutionary generation. Thank you so much for teaching. Thank you so much for being here. And I am happy to open for questions and conversation through the chat. So I'm reading some of the comments in the chat. I'm so glad it's the message you needed to hear today. It's the message I need to hear every day. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to write them. Thanks, Steve. Is there a program for students to lead other students? Oh, well, we are looking to have a solutionary micro-credential directly for students. And I also think that the solutionary framework, by its nature, helps students to become leaders, because as they become solutionaries, they are becoming leaders. That's interesting to think if there's a program directly for them. I'm sure that Julie is thinking, oh, let's see, what can we create next? Julie Meltzer is the director of K-12 and teacher education at the Institute for Humane Education, and she's here. Well, thank you all for your lovely comments. And I'll wait to see if there are any more questions. And otherwise, we will call it a night or wherever you are. Oh, tell us about your book. Oh, okay. So I wrote a book called The World Becomes What We Teach, Educating a Generation of Solutionaries. I made it really short so that it's a 2-hour read so that everybody would be able to find time to read it, including teachers who are so overwhelmed and don't have much time. And so you can, find it in bookstores or online. And there are a lot of teachers who are using it at their whole school or in a study group. In San Mateo County, California, in the Office of Education, one of the the environmental literacy coordinator, she read the book. She brought it to the other coordinators. They all read it together. They just, which many of those teachers continue to bring to their students today. Oh, thank you for putting that in the chat. I have a new book coming out. Yes, it's called The Solutionary Way, and it is for everybody. So not for teachers primarily, like The World Becomes What We Teach, but for anybody who wants to be a solutionary. And I just found out this afternoon that Jane Goodall has agreed to write the foreword to the book, which is really incredible. So I'm a bit on cloud 9 today and spending this time with all of you. Just, it's the icing on the cake of a beautiful day. And I think we'll end there. Thank you all again so, so, so much. You matter so, so much.